We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, let me tell you up front, you have also not overlapped on the books, just so you know.
I reckon there's more chance Luke's read, if not all of these. There's one I think he probably hasn't, but I reckon he's read 4 out of the 5.
I would hope so.
I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. Today, my guests are Luke Deckard and Matthew Booth, both of whom are podcasters, our favourite Cinema Sleuths. They used to be on Mean Streets, but they're both crime fiction authors, and so I asked them for their opinions about their most enjoyable, most favourite, most best in the field of noir fiction. Let's see what they came up with. Luke, Matt, welcome back to the podcast. You are just suckers for extra pain and punishment, and I'm so glad you're going to share it with us. So, welcome back to Fedora.
Thanks for having us back.
Thanks for having us back.
It's great.
Yes, no, it's brilliant. I know you're very busy on your own podcast, but today I've got you all to myself, and we're going to talk about books. And specifically, I want to talk about, to start with, your books. So could you tell me a little bit about your own adventures in publishing?
You want to go first, Matt?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Well, my latest series actually might come as a surprise to people who know me for doing noir stuff, but my latest series, which is 4 books in, is actually a sort of golden age type whodunit series set in the 30s with an amateur sleuth. It's a sort of looking back on the golden age with a darker twist. And you're holding 2 of them up there, Sergio. You're holding up the first and the second, Talent for Murder and The Dangers of This Night. These are the Everett Carr mysteries. I've written The House of Skulls, which is a PI noir thriller, which is currently a standalone, but there are plans to continue that. And I've been writing for about 30 years, truth be told. In fact, more than that now. 40 years. But only published 8 years ago, maybe. So it's been a long tread down the road. But none of it wasted, because you learn as you go.
What made you decide after all these decades to actually start publishing? What did it for you?
Well, I'd had a radio series, a couple of radio series on American radio back in the early 2000s. So I was sort of already done paid work, as it were. I had a full-time job, still got a full-time job, and I used to have to travel for that job. So I was really only able to write at weekends. And as any writer knows, you can't get the momentum going if you're just writing a week at a time. So what happened was lockdown. That's really what happened. So suddenly I couldn't leave the house, and I was not traveling to work anymore. I was working remotely, as I still do now. So I had an extra 2 hours, if not more, in the day, and I thought to myself, if you don't use this time now, you will never use it. And that coincided with a feeling I'd had of being tired of seeing all these divorced, maverick, drunk cops who tread the line and all that business. I'd got a bit sick of seeing those on the shelves, and I thought, why can't we have someone who's got a bit of compassion and a bit of he's quite lethal underneath, but he has a veneer of politeness and niceness, and he cares. And I gradually got this idea for a character, and I thought to myself, he's more befitting for the golden age, which is my other love in crime fiction. And so I said, this is it, we've got to go. And because again we were in lockdown, I was able to get a list of publishers. Well, my wife did it, because I edit the Crime Writers Association magazine, and one of the features on that is new releases. So every month I was getting between 10 and 30 new releases, all from different publishers. So we did a spreadsheet of all those publishers to see who would take this sort of stuff. And I got a 3-book deal out of it, which was then renewed at the end of, when it came to its end and I delivered the 3rd book, they renewed it. So I'm writing the 5th book. Well, no, I'm writing the 5th book now of that second 3-book deal.
And these are the Carr books?
These are the Carr books, yeah.
Can I just ask, is Carr named for my favourite Golden Age author, John Dixon Carr?
Yes, he is.
Aha!
There's a crime writing or crime fiction festival, a weekend festival called Alibis in the Archives at Gladstone's Library. And I was there earlier this year and met his granddaughter. And she's a really nice woman. When I told her, she was sort of beside herself. She couldn't believe it. She said he'd have been absolutely over the moon. So there you go. That's exactly who he's named after. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, right.
No, I'm such a fan. I've got all his books behind me, either in English or Italian. I've been reading them since 1983.
Yeah, for that sort of subgenre, they're the best.
What's your latest novel, and when is it coming out?
My latest is the next instalment in the Everett Carr mysteries, which is my ongoing series of tributes to the Golden Age. This one should be out end of May, early June. I think it's available for pre-order. And this one sees Carr up in the frozen north of England as he unwisely, it turns out, accepts an invitation to go and stay with a wealthy mill owner, factory owner, up in the Lancashire Dales. As is often the case in Golden Age stuff, everyone hates this man and everyone's got a reason to kill him. And Carr is very fearful for his life and warns him as much. But when murder does strike, it is not that man who is killed. It is somebody completely different, for whose murder there seems to be no motive whatsoever. So Carr is up against what seems to be a random killer. And it's called A Sudden Vengeance.
So how about you, Luke? What got you into the publishing game?
Let me think here. It was a long time ago. I've had it's been a long, lonely road. I've always been interested in storytelling since I was a kid. I used to, I would write little Star Trek fan fiction. I would write, this is really embarrassing, and I can't believe I put this out there on the internet, but I'd write like Digimon fan fiction. Things that I loved, I would write little fan fictions of. And then as I got older, I remember like Spider-Man 3 and X-Men 3 came out, and I was like, well, those sucked. And then I was like, well, maybe I could write something. And so I was kind of, I'd punch away at some story ideas. And so it's always kind of been there. And I was very musical as a teen and, played instruments and wrote lyrics and had a couple of bands and stuff. So I've always had a sort of drawl for writing, music and, words. Then I sort of put that away for a while and went to university. And then it was when I saw the Robert Downey Jr. Holmes movie, I was like, cool. I liked Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid. I wonder if I still like him. I like the movie. I don't like the movie anymore, but I liked it at the time. And went and picked up for £6 the whole collection from Waterstones and just started reading a bunch of Holmes novels. And this was it was maybe 2 years before, my 2 years left of my degree, maybe a year and a half, and then moved to London for work and didn't know anybody and found myself, kind of hanging out by myself quite a bit and thought, well, what am I going to do with all this time when I'm not, not at work? I could have gone out socializing, but instead I started to write little Holmes pastiche stories. Some were good, some were not good. Some of them are published. Some of them should not have been published. They're under my real name, which I don't go by. So if someone wants to do some sleuthing themselves, then they can go and find them. Although I will say, some of them were translated into Italian, I believe. So I don't know if those have been done well. Maybe that would be better. Maybe the translation of my work would be better in some instances.
So would those have appeared as Luke or
yeah, well now you've given it away. Now the sleuth.
I can totally cut that. Don't worry about it. Sorry.
That's also fine. Keep it in. It's funny. I put some Sherlock Holmes stuff out for a while, and then something I really liked was I did a book called Welcome to Understraw, which is am I allowed to say the F word? Okay, it's a terrible title that I didn't really want, but it's a really good kind of coffee table book that explores Conan Doyle's time in Hindhead, where he built the house Understraw for his wife. And I wrote that for the school who now owns the building and operates out of it. And that was a kind of a nice little cap to my Holmes career. But then after that, I thought, I want to go and do something different, and decided to go do a master's in creative writing and wrote sort of the proto version character of who I would take forward into my PhD novel, which was originally, it had a few different titles, but it came out officially last year under the title Bad Blood through, hey, you got it, with one of the worst covers I've ever seen in my life.
No.
But I can say that because I've parted ways with that publisher. And now I have a new book coming out called No Saints, Only Killers. So it's a 1920s historical thriller set in London and Edinburgh. It's about a private investigator who goes in search of a missing woman that has some mysterious connection to his father, who's been recently beaten to a pulp and put into a coma. But when my detective gets to Edinburgh looking for her, she's missing. And he gets into a lot of trouble trying to find out why.
And when can people get this book?
June 10th in paperback and ebook, and I believe hardback will be available, and audiobook will be available at some point in the very near future. There is a short Kickstarter that my publisher is running. If you back it, you can get special signed editions of the hardback and the paperback. So if anyone wants to do that before May 23rd, you have a short window of being able to jump on the Kickstarter to get signed editions and whatnot. But otherwise, general release will be June 10th. So I wrote that book for my PhD, and that was, by this point in time, I'm steeped in watching a lot more noir. I'm reading a lot more hard-boiled fiction. I just really wanted to write a book that was in the time and in the period where hard-boiled detectives were becoming fashionable. So it's set in the 1920s, where you got your Race Williams is coming out in the States, and Dashiell Hammett's Constable Opp is sort of popping up, and Hemingway's work is out and inspiring these authors as well. I really just wanted to write a book set in the period that was the big inspiration for those characters and explore that archetypal character in an environment that I found interesting. So he's not set in the mean streets of anywhere in the United States. He's set in London for a little bit, and then he goes to Edinburgh and spends the bulk of the story in Edinburgh trying to find a missing woman that's connected to his dad's death. Yeah, I explores PTSD and the way, because that was something I was, as I was doing a lot of my research for the PhD, I was thinking, a lot of these guys, they say they went through the war, but they've got that kind of stoicism, and they just we don't see any war scars on them. They might do a couple of throwaway comments here and there, or you might see something in the story that emphasizes war scars. But I was like, how many times do you see the PI crippled by the fact that he's haunted by war, and not haunted in like a James Crumley kind of way where it's cool and you're just down in a bunch of whiskey and doing a bunch of cocaine, but quite fragile. You can't get up because of what is going on around you. And so I was very fascinated with those ideas and coping mechanisms and things like that. And so I try to pour a lot of that into this little novel. And I fell in love with writing that book. It solidified for me versus when I was doing some of the Golden Age stuff that noir really is my jam, and that is where I think I do. That's where I'm better suited on the page to do that sort of stuff. And I think even if people go back and look at my home stuff, it's not really Golden Agey. It's quite dark. It's quite noir. It's not twee. Some people liked it. Some people didn't. The people who didn't, I'm like, maybe I don't blame you. If you're looking for, there's a sort of Ripper Street quality to my Holmes novels. Right. It's gritty, but yeah, so that's been sort of my journeys.
But we're going to talk about other people's books now. Yes. So yeah. I asked you both, following on from our previous film noir remake top 10, I've asked you guys to come up with 5 is a ridiculously small number, but to come up with 5 noir books or hard-boiled books that you particularly like and that you'd like to talk about. And okay, we've rated them 5th to 1st, but I'm not going to hold you to any of those. I think they're all great books and they all deserve to be on the list. So it's time to flip the penguin and see head or tails. So this time I think Matt's going to be tail and Luke's going to be head, and we're going to flip it over and it's tails. So it's Matt starting and he's going to kick this one off. So your number 5, Matt, is... Well, you immediately started trying to cheat, which was outrageous. So explain to everybody how you wanted to try and game the system.
I feel spotted. Well, because my number 5 is is a book called Berlin Noir by Philip Kerr, but really it's 3 books because it was reissued as a trilogy.
Yeah.
To be fair to me, and what Sergio's not telling people is that I did say to him, or just March Violets if we can't count this as one.
Well, tell us about the books. So March Violets.
Berlin Noir are the first 3 novels in the Bernie Gunther series, written by Philip Kerr. These are historical fiction set. If you look at the whole canon of the Bernie Gunther novels, they're set between sort of mid to late 30s to the 50s. It spans a long time, but they don't necessarily appear. They don't appear chronologically. But March Violets is the first, and Berlin Noir are the 3 novels that kick off the series. I discovered these purely by chance because I was looking for Chandler-esque stories that didn't know anything about, that I could read without knowing any sort of background to. By which I mean I'd not seen a film and I was going to go and read the book because I'd seen the film or anything like that. And I asked a friend of mine who I was working with at the time, who also likes noir stuff, and I said that to him. I said, "What would you recommend?" And he said, "Go and get Berlin Noir." So at lunchtime, I went straight to Waterstones in Manchester, found it, and started reading it there and then, and just loved it. Bernie Gunther is a German private eye. It is Chandler-esque to me, but it has the added thrill, if that's the right word, of Bernie trying to avoid the Nazis, essentially, who are now sort of rising in power, and trying to stay alive, essentially, because he doesn't necessarily agree with what is going on, but can't admit it. And what's great is the seediness of the underbelly and all the stuff that's going on. People are saying one thing to as a public face, but then something quite different to people they think they can trust. I just think Bernie is a very engaging and fascinating, multifaceted and fascinating protagonist. They're first person and soon to be on the TV.
There's 13 books, so they're doing the books then?
They are, yeah. I don't know if they're
starting with the prequel book. They're starting with the Metropolis. It's called Metropolis.
Metropolis, yeah.
So they're going for a chronological telling of the story, as it were.
Yeah. The German setting and the period adds an extra frisson to what are essentially Chandler-esque private eye stories. And they're so readable. I devoured them. They're so rewarding and highly recommended. They are 3 great novels. So there's March Violets, The Pale Criminal, and A German Requiem. And they're individual novels, but they do feel like a cohesive whole when you read them.
Luke, you going to disagree with any of that? Or
I don't. I know I don't. I love them. I think you've all have said pretty much the main things to say about it. The only thing I would add is I love the fact that Kerr's intention was to put Philip Marlowe in Nazi Germany, and how would that character operate in that environment? And I love it. And I think March Violets is a fantastic novel. Bernie Gunther is a fun and interesting character, and Philip Kerr was a damn good writer.
Very good writer.
He was very inspirational for me when I was doing some of my historical stuff.
Because I think there have been other books, obviously, with that setting now. In fact, there are actually ones in Italy set during the fascist era as well. But in fact, earlier on in my life, I remember reading more counterfactual history. Set during the era, so you would get, say, Robert Harris's Fatherland or Len Dayton's fantastic SSGB, which didn't make particularly good telly, but a terrific book all the same. So, Luke, what's your number 5? You've picked a tougher read, frankly. Tell everybody
which one did I pick? Because now I don't know if I wrote them down in order on my paper here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, okay, on your number 5, it's James Crumley's The Wrong Case, which is not actually my favourite Crumley. I thought I'd stick that out there right away.
That's all right.
Tell us about this one.
Yeah, James Crumley. I don't know if this is nostalgia or what. This was the first Crumley that I read, and I came to Crumley really late. I found him 2016-ish, just doing general research, and came across the name, and then found the first book in Waterstones, and thought, oh, that sounds pretty great. So why not? I just fell in love with it. I thought it was. I love the kind of the opening. Milo is just sort of like, oh, I used to do divorces. Now it's legal. Now this job really sucks. He's like, oh, my dad's left me some money, but I'm not old enough for it yet. And he's an old guy. He's not old, but he's a very mature man. He's not. He's kind of like, I could use this stupid money, and he's got, working in this big office building, and with his family's name. I believe his family owned the office, owned the building, and I just like the idea that Milo is this guy who hates his job, is broke, but has this money in the future, and he's just struggling to get to it. But I also like that it's, this is sort of Nam era stuff. And this was also a big inspiration for me when I was doing Bad Blood to some degree. And that was, I like that he is suffering from it, and his version of coping is lots of whiskey and cocaine and stuff like that, and it's very dark, very sleazy, but very, you read this, everything just feels hot and sweaty and gross. If you were to compare it to a film, maybe something like Body Heat or something, you can that kind of, you can just feel the mustiness. Like every window is foggy and streaky, and that is a testament, I think, just to Crumley's writing. I think he writes very vivid worlds, and very vivid characters that are morally compromised in ways that don't feel cliched. And it was a fun experience to go along with this book. But I similar to maybe like what you guys are saying about in the film podcast about things like Elephant Man and stuff. Crumley's not someone I return to for fun. These are dense novels, and they are tough. So you don't read them for a jolly good time or a fun romp, the way that you might go back to a Chandler or, Maltese Falcon or something like that. These are slightly tougher, chewier reads.
Do you prefer the Milo Dragovich books to the Sugru books?
Yeah,
I really like The Last Good Kiss. That's the one for me.
Yes, that one is good. I do like that, but in general, the Sugru, I don't know what it is. I don't dislike them, so that I don't want it to come across like I don't like I'm trashing them. I'm not. But I gravitate towards Milo for some reason. There's something about that character that I connect with more than the other.
I mean, oddly enough, I never read the book where they both appear. So, because I think he did 3 of each, right? And
he did.
And I can't remember what it's called, but I haven't read that one. They're tough reading. They make people like Andrew Vax and James Elroy come across as complete lightweights. Let's face it. This is a genuinely hard-boiled guy. Okay, Matt, your next one down is, I think, a superb book. It's Black and Blue by Ian Rankin. Surely his breakthrough novel.
Certainly his breakthrough novel. And for me, it's still his best. He's written some crackers after, don't get me wrong, but for me, he's never really encapsulated so many things and so many themes and been so audacious as he is in this book. I'll explain why I say audacious in a minute. Prior to this book, the Rebus novels were, by Ian's own admission, they were sort of mid-list. They were getting more complex as they went on. They weren't really tackling anything that he would now say were important themes as such. They were general crime novels. And I think it's true to say that his publishers were on the verge of almost dropping him when he produced this. Right. He produced Black and Blue. And he was going through a bad time himself at the time. And he put all his angst, all his anger, all his frustration. In his introduction to one of the editions, he says, I used Rebus as a punch bag. And he sure does.
He gets beat up a lot. Yeah,
he gets beat up a lot in this, and it's called Black and Blue for a lot of different reasons. It's all about oil, which is black gold, and Rebus is a boy in blue, obviously being a policeman. So there's that. The bruises that he gets will be black and blue. There's all this sort of stuff going on. What I love about this book is not only is it a dense crime novel in its own right, and it's by far the most complex of his novels. This has a real life unidentified killer in it called Bible John, who, and this is why I think it's audacious, who is a character in the book. Nobody knows who he was in real life, but he was a genuine killer in Glasgow, I think. A very famous case. And Rankin had the idea that what would happen if someone took on that mantle? How would a killer who's got away with it react? And the way that he has him react is to come and find what he calls the upstart. So there are passages in this book written from the point of view of Bible John. And because you don't know who he is, I suppose you can say, well, I can do anything I want with him. He's become almost a mythical figure. I think that is a really gutsy thing to do. And this was sort of be all and end all for Ian Rankin. Why not put everything that you want in this book, everything you can think of to get away with in this book? And it shot to it got the gold dagger for the CWA. One of the reviews said the best crime novel of this year, which I think is 95, has already been written, but it's just not been released yet. That's how much of an impact it had. I mean, it's a thick book, much thicker than the preceding books, but it never flags. And you can tell the Elroy influence because it's not told in complete sentences. There are complete sentences in it, but very much. Otherwise, it'd be too hard to read. But very often, it's just Rebus dumped his bag on the floor, whatever. Too tired. Just little phrases like that just don't need any more words on them. So for a thick book, it's quite streamlined in its writing. And he's really up against it, he's Rebus. He's juggling 4 cases. He's got a media circus on his back because someone he put away is protesting innocence and all the rest of it. And it's just politically relevant for the time it was written. And it's a rollicking good read. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Are you a fan, Luke? Of
Rebus? I'm a Rebus fan. I like Rebus a lot. I like Black and Blue. It's it's a terrific novel. Flesh Market Close is one of my favorite of the Rebus, but the character of Rebus, the Edinburgh atmosphere. Rankin's he's a very good writer. So I'm high praise for Rebus, high praise for Rankin over here.
Rebus is a cop, but he's very much a private eye, really.
Sure.
He's not really a cop.
He doesn't follow any of the rules.
No, and they're all told. I mean, really, I've always said these could be first-person narratives, and you wouldn't really see any difference. That becomes less so as he goes on after this book, when Siobhan Clarke becomes more prominent, and then of course Malcolm Fox comes in, so it becomes less the case. Yeah. But at this stage in Rebus's career, he's essentially a private eye with a warrant card. That's not a criticism. I mean, that's what I love about him.
Mm-mm. Yeah. No, I mean, I remember when it came out. I mean, I remember buying it and just being really impressed. But like you say, it's a bit of a big boy. And I think, there's just a lot going on.
There's really a lot going on, but I never find it flags. And he's in control of all of it all the way through. He knows what he's doing with this book all the way through. And it is the book that made him.
Going from a book that kind of was a breakthrough book, Luke's next choice is a book that came at the end of a very impressive career, and I just reread it in anticipation of this, and it's Ross MacDonald's The Blue Hammer. Tell us about that, Luke.
Yes, The Blue Hammer. Ross MacDonald is another favorite of mine. I have not read all of Ross's books yet. I have them all. I went on this kick about 6-7 months ago, where I was like, it annoyed me that they're quite hard to get a hold of. Several of them are out and about, but the whole collection is not easy to get. No one publisher is doing all of them. So I went and scoured eBay for various copies so that I could make sure I have all of them, because there are a few hard-boiled writers that I just want all of their stuff, and he is one of them. Blue Hammer, again, I think has a bit of a soft spot for me as well, because this was one I looked to a lot when I was doing my PhD. I love generally what I love about Ross MacDonald, and the Blue Hammer kind of is a good example of this, I think, is that what he brings to the genre is psychoanalysis, looking at and exploring family dynamics in a way that the previous hard-boiled kind of leaders hadn't done yet. His sort of that was his sort of new thing that he was injecting into the genre, and I like that, and I think that is handled really well here. I mean, MacDonald had lots of family drama, and so I think it sort of makes sense that a lot of that comes out in this, and almost every case he gets involved in, there's some sort of complex family drama, which you could say, that happens in all the Chandler's novels, it happens in, so on and so on. But the way that he explores the family dynamics and why families do what they do, why they turn on each other, why they lie, why they manipulate, all that sort of stuff, I found just, very captivating. But at the same time, in addition to that, I Ross's, this is what's I love about just this genre in general is, most noir is typically written in first person past tense. And you read MacDonald, you read Chandler, you read Crumley, they're all utilizing the same narrative voice, but there's just the distinction is incredible, I think. And the way that he writes is, Chandler said it, I think, in Simple Art of Murder, that it's all about the style that you bring to the genre. And I think MacDonald is a really good example of, he's writing in a very familiar style, or in a very familiar genre, but it's his style that he brings to it that makes everything pop and stand out and feel different, and just proves the dexterity of this genre. But no, I love this. I love the Blue Hammer. I love the painting of it, the painting aspect, that you think it's going to be a bigger deal than maybe what it is, but the whole sort of trying to chip into the family life in this. I kind of don't want to spoil too much about this book in case someone hasn't read it. But the setup is wonderfully noir. You've got your old lady, go find my long lost son, and then you've
that's not actually true.
Well, what's not?
That never happens in the Blue Hammer. The opposite happens. The old lady says, "Leave my son alone." Surely,
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Well, he's off to find a picture, isn't he? And yes. But it's great because I think you're absolutely right. The picture is this wonderful sort of symbol for this slipperiness, because the plot is fearsomely complex, and this whole idea of just who actually painted it becomes remarkably convoluted. Is only resolved kind of in the last couple of pages, which is handled extremely well, considering that MacDonald was not a well guy by the time he was writing this book. So I think it comes across so well. And, but literally I've got it very fresh in my mind. I finished reading it last week. You just read the sucker. I just read it, so, but also I've been reading MacDonald for 40 years. I'm a huge fan. I read The Chill when I was 16, and I just thought, well, this is just about the best book I've ever read. So, that was just fantastic. I always think The Chill is the one that people should read. I think that's the one that turns people around. By the way, I was just going to mention, that the plot you were talking about for Black and Blue, because made me think of William Goldman, because William Goldman did the adaptation of the first MacDonald Lew Archer book and turned it into Harper. But I don't know if you've read No Way to Treat a Lady, his novel, which is based on the idea that the Boston Strangler, somebody tries to imitate the Boston Strangler, and the Boston Strangler gets jealous.
Oh, there you go, you see. Yeah, it's all connected.
It's a terrific book. I mean, they turned that into a movie as well, where they actually dumped that premise, bizarrely. But No Way to Treat a Lady by William Goldman is a fantastic short book that he wrote when he had ginormous writer's block. He was in the middle of writing this huge book called Boys and Girls Together. Isn't that a great 60s title? And it was going to be his magnum opus. It was going to be 500, 600 pages long. And he got completely stuck, which had never happened to him. So he literally sort of said, I'll write another book to unblock myself. So he decided, right, I'm going to write a thriller. And it's going to come out as a paperback. Every chapter starts on a new page. So basically, you have these incredibly short chapters that are about a page and a half long. So it's a book that's about 150 pages long with about 50 chapters, Wow. And that was how he felt. No, I'm producing, I'm creating, but it's a terrific read, and pulls an unbelievably nasty reversal 3/4 of the way through, which is brilliantly handled. And it just is an absolute kick in the balls.
What's it called?
No Way to Treat a Lady.
Oh, well, that's an Amazon search.
Well, it was originally published as by Harry Longbow, which was the original name of, I think, The Sundance Kid, because he was researching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which, he was writing as a screenplay, and he ended up getting the Oscar for that. And but it's since come out, and there is a uniform edition of his books, and they've all been reprinted. And so it's under his name. But it's a terrific read. I really recommend it. So sorry, slightly hijacked that one. Matt, what do you think about Ross MacDonald? Isn't he fantastic? Okay, that was cheeky.
Yeah, I am a Ross MacDonald fan. I've not read this particular one, I have to say, because I've not read them all. But massive fan of the early stuff. You know, the moving target, and the drowning pool, and some of the mid stuff like the Witchley Woman and the Galton case.
Yeah, those count as later ones. So yeah.
Those are real top notch noir.
Mm.
And again, it's that I discovered those for the same reason I discovered Bernie Gunther, which is that I was looking for not a Chandler replacement as such, but a sort of logical progression from Chandler, and found those. I can't remember how I found those. I suspect I saw that Harper film on TV.
Well, you guys have done a terrific podcast on that, and
it's a terrific film.
So it's a great movie, isn't it? Yeah.
A film my father-in-law could not handle, so he stormed out of the room.
Really? What exactly was it that upset him? I mean,
we don't know.
It's not that kind of movie, is it? Not really.
No. He's got a very, I don't know. We don't know.
Okay. So over to Matt for his third choice, which is one of the Benjamin Black books,
yes.
Or the first one, in fact, Christine Falls. Tell us a bit about that.
So this is Christine Falls, which is the first in the Quirk series, which are Irish noirs set in the 1950s, written by Benjamin Black, who is also known by his real name, which is John Banville. What I'll say at the outset is the Quirk novels are highly recommended, but Banville's or Black's Marlowe continuation novel is not. That's pretty bad.
It's sort of a sequel to The Longer By, isn't it? And
when you read the Quirk novels, the 1950s atmosphere is so well done that on paper he's a good choice to do a Marlowe continuation novel, but he's not the right man for the job.
No, I agree.
He's not the right man for the job. So I don't want anyone to be put off by that, or indeed the Liam Neeson film that follows it, because the Quirk novels are fantastic, and Christine Falls is the first of them. Quirk is a pathologist in Dublin in the 1950s, and he's a wreck of a man. He's a total drunk and failed in love, but he has this tenacity. He's not necessarily a skilled detective, but he has this tenacity that he will not let something go. When he think he's got the bit between his teeth, he will not let it go, even when it brings him into danger, as it does in Christine Falls. For my money, like all great noirs, it starts as something quite little. It starts as a bit of mild forgery on a death certificate, but what it leads to is a massive conspiracy that extends from Dublin to America, to Boston in America. And Quirk is right at the heart of it. It's an absolutely fantastic book. It's very dark. There's some really gruesome murders in it. One particular gruesome murder where a woman is tortured and killed. And it's all a bit like I said about Rebus. They're third-person narratives, but it's all really told through Quirk's eyes for the main part of it. But then there are subplots that are going on that you do think, what's this got to do with anything? But when they come together, they really come together in like a pretty shocking way. And it goes right to the heart of Quirk himself. When he finds out what it is, it goes to the very heart of Quirk and who he thought he was. It's just a fantastic start to a series. And they've got, obviously everyone has hiccups in a series, and there are some that aren't as good as others. But as these things go, it's a fairly consistently good series. I've just read the latest one, because now they've moved into, Quirk's got something of a sort of uneasy sidekick or an uneasy alliance with a detective now called Strafford. And they're novels about these people. That just happen to stumble upon crimes. The plots are secondary to what the people are going through, and the pain and the anguish. And what's great about the series is that this is definitely a series to read in order, because what happens is the effects of book one on certain characters is then pursued through book two, then into book three. Then they might make a decision about how they're going to deal with it in book four, and it carries on. So they are going chronologically. Highly recommended. That not a great deal happens. There's no real car chases or things like that. But the writing is so lyrical and so beautiful, whilst also being so grim and dark, that you just carried along, and before you know it, you're right in the thick of this mystery. And it's the same for all the books.
And then they're now all coming out as by Banville, aren't they? He doesn't seem to be using the Black.
He's ditched Black now. Yeah, he's ditched Benjamin Black now. I think he gets about 6 or 7 books in before he ditches it. And then he wrote a book called Snow, which is a Strafford book on his own, D.I. Strafford. and Quirk is in the follow-up to that. So now they're billed as the Quirk and Strafford mysteries. And I wonder whether he said, well, Quirk was Benjamin Black and Strafford is John Banville. And then publishing forces said, well, we could combine the two, John. Nice. I don't know if that's what happened. They're all quite noir, but this is the one that I consider perhaps the most noir of all. It starts at night with some dodgy shenanigans, and it continues along those lines.
Yeah. Have either of you seen the TV series adaptation?
Yes.
No. Yeah, it wasn't great, was it? I mean, I liked the casting. I thought Gabriel Byrne was interesting.
Yeah, they're just a bit flat. The scripts are a bit flat.
Just a shame, because the first two by Andrew Davies, who's a terrific writer. But
it was a missed opportunity. That's all I'd say about that. It was a missed opportunity, because these are maybe the hour and a half format didn't work. I reckon you could get a couple of episodes out of a Quirk novel, a bit like the John Hannah Rebuses and the Ken Stock Rebuses. For an hour and a half, they're big books to condense, and I think it works better when they're episodic with 4 or 5 episodes. And I think Quirk would benefit from that. But I'd like to see him return. They're not a series you don't often see Quirk discussed in crime fiction circles, So
yeah,
he's sort of an outsider, but they don't deserve to be. They're really good.
No, I mean the last one came out last year?
Yeah, or early this year. Yeah, I think it was last year. I've just finished reading it. Last week, and it's brilliant, And what he does is he did something in the book before, which was called The Lockup, which was really audacious. I'm not going to say what it was. As I said earlier, he then follows it through in the latest one, which is called The Drowning. So you do have to read them in order, but they are well worth the time.
So let's move on to your next choice, which I think we're all a bit more familiar with. So this is the Sue Grafton, Kinsey Millhone series, and the first one, A is for Alibi.
I think Sue Grafton was a really good noir writer, hard-boiled writer. I always enjoy the women writers who try and take the this genre that is typically masculine, and put it put the female character in that place of the tough and gritty private eye, and I think Kinsey's great. I think she ticks a lot of the boxes. She's got the wisecrack. She's very independent. She's also tough, but at the same time, I find her, she's also very, like all good hard-boiled PIs. She's insightful. She's got a keen eye. And she comes at things from a different perspective. And I think that's sometimes it kind of gets lost. And you'll academic circles, you'll see criticisms of Grafton or Sarah Pretsky and being like, oh, they're not real feminists. They're still being blah 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 blah. And then you're just sort of like, actually, it's pretty cool to have, this female protagonist who is confident and strong and able to fight and able to hold herself in situations, but also be able to have to deal with certain things that certain male private eyes might not have to deal with, whether that is, well, this big hulking guy. I mean, think about it, Marlowe up against Moose Malloy. He knows that he's not going to survive that fight. Now we're coming at that sort of perspective, but from a female perspective, which is probably a bit more scary, because someone like a Moose is probably going to kill someone like a Kinsey Millhone. And yeah, so I've always enjoyed that stuff. And I know it's a bit of a gimmick, but I like her use of the alphabet. Just A is for Alibi, B is for Burglar. Yeah. Crazy to think that it took so long for someone to actually do a whole series. Because when did this one come out? Was it the late 80s? Early late 70s?
Mid 80s
or something?
Yeah, I remember when they were coming out. The kind of the alphabet series, and the fact that she missed it by
82.
She missed it by 1. It's so annoying. Yes.
Which one didn't she do? She didn't do Z. She was never going to do Z, apparently.
Oh, well, it ends at Y in that case.
Yes. If I remember right, she only was going to do, she didn't have one for Z, or wasn't going to do Z, and I don't know if that was due to whatever, but that was that. But no, I think I'm a fan of her work. I'm a fan of this novel. I like the concept. I like what she's doing. I like this. I was married. I'm not married. Wait, was she married?
Well, okay. A for Alibi is the one that she wrote because she was going through her second divorce, which I think was particularly difficult because there was a long, protracted custody battle. So
Yes.
that's it was kind of like, how am I going to kill my husband kind of narrative. So
Yes.
it was that was, I think, how it came about.
Because then I was also getting confused with Robert B. Parker's
Joan Parker. Yes.
No, Robert B. Parker.
Yeah, his wife, Joan. Oh, okay.
No. He has a female private eye who's also
yes, Sonny.
who's Sonny Randall. Yes, yeah. Sometimes they all kind of blend into one a little bit, but and it's a bit hard. It's a bit hard sometimes. A bit difficult. But but I don't know. I like her agency. I like the toughness that Sue Grafton brings to this. Is it controversial to say I prefer Grafton to Pretsky? I think there's a.
I would say the same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although I think Sharon McCone, Marsha Muller's detective, is probably that's kind of almost the origin point, and so you've got to Mrs. Bill Pronzini, of course. So we have to doff our caps to that, I think. Or tip our fedoras. I got that in there. How amazing!
That was very smooth, Sergio.
Well, thank you very much. So, what do you think, Matt? Are you a Sue Grafton fan?
Yeah, I've not read anywhere near as much Sue Grafton as I think I probably should. I read 4 or 5 in sort of early 2000s, but I think, as Luke said before, in different contexts, life takes over. Other writers come along. I remember thinking these are these would make good TV series or good films if they were done correctly. And I'm surprised that someone's not picked them up. But there you go. Yeah, one for me to revisit, I think.
V.I. Wachowski obviously was turned into a movie which wasn't very good. It was Kathleen Turner played the role better. It's not her fault, but she was better in the radio versions, I thought, which she'd done for the BBC,
yes, she is.
and they were closer to the books. And I think that it's that thing too. I can't even remember if the movie is even based on one of the books. So it's
it is.
It is. Is it? Okay.
It was I think it was like our 3rd or 4th episode.
We did an episode.
Absolutely hilarious. That
right.
movie.
Sorry. Okay.
It's really it's a tough watch.
It's tough.
I saw it the pictures when it came out. Never seen it since. So.
It's hilarious. We had a great fun tearing that to pieces.
But let's move on to a giant of the hardboiled genre. It's time we picked up a little bit of Chandler. So, Matt, what's the book?
The book is The Lady in the Lake.
So how come The Lady in the Lake?
For 2 reasons.
By Raymond Chandler, yes.
For 3 reasons. One, it's Chandler. I think I said on last time we were on that the first noir novel I bought was this book. So there is a huge sentimental streak running through me, and this choice satisfies that. But also, I think it's the closest. My other love is the classic British detective story, and I think this is the closest Chandler comes to it.
Okay, yeah.
Marlowe is finding clues, and Marlowe is there is a surprise solution that's switched identities and things. It's all very for Chandler, for noir. It's all very sort of Agatha Christie. And I think this is his coziest book, if I can put it that way, because there's a lot of that sort of puzzle element to it for me. But that aside, the idea of and the description of that body when they find it, when Bill Chess finds it, is just sickening, and it's so good. And I love the sort of what's the name of the cop? The name of the cop escapes me now.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm going to call him DeGarmo or something.
DeGarmo, yeah, Delgado. Is it Delgado?
Something.
DeGarmo.
Sorry.
I mean, he's a great villain, as it were. And when Marlowe gets onto the fact that this nurse was killed, something happened at this doctor's house, and you think, how is this connected to the Derace Kingsley's missing wife? What is going on? And there's a real puzzle element to this, which satisfies my golden age itch, in a noir forum. So that's why I chose it for those 2 reasons. It was the first one I read, and it does something that the others doesn't do and scratches 2 itches that I have in crime fiction. And it's a dead good read. It's a good fun read.
I think it is his most complicated plot. Wouldn't you agree, Luke? I mean, I think so.
I think so. I really like this, and I think you're right, Matt, that this is probably the coziest that he gets. Yeah. I mean, the Long Goodbye is complicated, but that's for different reasons. This is, as I'm trying to remember through all of his work, this really is the most kind of puzzly based one, where he is constantly trying to work the mystery out, of the mistaken identity. And also, I think so much of it being set by this lake, far away from this big city. I mean, obviously there's a lot of city stuff in this, but there's also a lot of time not being in a rural environment. That I think also adds to maybe the golden agey vibe, because most golden age is country house.
Yeah, you
walk for a mystery.
You don't often get urban golden ages. They're very often in villages.
Yeah, I mean, even Sherlock Holmes, almost every story of Sherlock Holmes is being taken out of London.
Yeah. yeah. It's just that puzzle element that I like. You know, it's nice to see Chandler sort of having a go, if you know what I mean. Whether it succeeds, that's for other people to judge, I think. I just really like the whole setup, and I love the way that the story is told. And it stands out as being different. Now, if you don't like that sort of puzzle element, it's probably one of your least favourite, you know. But for me, and with the sentimental side of it, because it was the one that started it all, it just has a sort of special place on the shelf for me.
Now, Luke, your next choice is also Chandler, but a different Chandler. So, and we might guess this from from some things that we've discussed in the past.
Yes.
So, tell us about Farewell, My Lovely.
It is probably my favorite of Marlowe's adventures. I like to revisit them all, but this one is just there's something quite satisfying about this one. I think it's better than The Big Sleep. I think Chandler has a stronger grasp of what he's trying to do narratively with Marlowe, and with his examination of society and corruption and that sort of dourness that is the human existence. The ending of this book, which I'll spoil, so if you've not read it, like, where have you been? But I've always been quite taken with both the beginning and both the ending of this book, and the ending being so bleak in that Moose is killed and she gets away, and then we don't really get to see justice served, but some cops find her and she offs herself. It's so sad and so chaotic, and you've gone through this whole adventure, these ups and downs, and you're just left with this life is bleak and there are no happy endings, and that's one of the those things I love about hard-boiled fiction, and that is, it's not the solving of the crime, the quote-unquote solving of the crime doesn't stop the emotions. The emotions don't suddenly go, the sad emotions don't go away. I always like the idea that these sort of novels end on a lot of times there's a downbeat ending. It's always bittersweet. There might be some resolution, there might be some glimmer of, not hope, but some glimmer of resolution, but there is this sort of, what was the point of all of this?
Yeah.
And that is crime. And I think this Farewell, My Lovely really tackles the emptiness of crime and obsession and doing what you can to, I don't know, get what you want. And then what does that get you? But dead. So for me, Farewell, My Lovely just remains one of my favorite Marlowes, if not my favorite one. But also again, Marlowe is a complicated character. Chandler is a complicated guy. He takes us to complicated areas of LA and Bay City, and you're sort of getting a mixture of Chandler's commentary, which is sometimes not what we would like it to be. Sometimes his sentiments aren't echoed what we would think or believe today. But then in other places he is quite progressive, and I can't tell if that's a slip of the pen or what. I think I'm a big fan of Farewell, My Lovely.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, of course, this is the one that ends with Marlowe sort of with Anne Riden, actually,
yes,
which is kind of the one time that happens until you get to right at the end.
Yes,
and in a way that's quite nice. It does offset it, and we've discussed this, of course, on your podcast, the underlying theme being about civic corruption,
yes,
which gives it this whole, which tends to get, well, has always been cut out of the film versions, all three of them, of the book, which is very irritating. Even the 1970s version just wasn't going to get into it. I mean, obviously, Bay City is San Diego. It was interesting. We could have mentioned it when we talked about Sue Grafton, of course, is that her books are, is it Santa Teresa? And Santa Teresa, of course, is really Santa Barbara, but it's from Ross MacDonald, because it's what he calls Santa Barbara in his books. Yeah. So there's a lovely interconnectedness about all of this, which is terrific. But it is a terrific book. But I think that elevates it as well. I think that seriousness of intent, that aspect of it. Yeah. Which, okay, everybody ignores it, but I think it's very interestingly handled, and I think it's done well. It's that one, because I love this idea that he sort of, and actually it comes up in the Blue Hammer decades later, where you get this thing where the detective wants to kind of walk away from his employers who are rich and powerful, but they open doors for him. So that actually every now and then it's very convenient to say, oh, but of course I'm working for, the super rich family. And, so that works interestingly as a kind of ironic rejoinder to that in the Farewell, My Lovely. So I think that is one of the many great things about that book. I mean, you feel the same way, Matt. I mean, I think we have talked about this one before.
Yeah, this is one of my favourite Chandlers, and I agree with Luke. I think it is a big improvement on The Big Sleep. I think it's a much more assured piece of work. I
can't remember if I did this in our podcast on Farewell, My Lovely, but I have very strong feelings about The Big Sleep, particularly because I just think it has, it's one of those books like Tale of Two Cities, brilliantly memorable opening, brilliantly memorable ending. And I love the way that he handles the Rusty Regan plotline. Yes. I think that's incredibly clever. You're constantly looking in the wrong direction. It's true. You can see the joins, the kind of the stories that he's adapting. It's true. But I think that bit is so smart. It's actually hard to beat. I think it's so interesting how that's handled, and it really pays off because, of course, it's the solution to everything. And again, except for the annoying Michael Winner 1970s adaptation, doesn't get used. So, people tend to not even know about it. So we continue on our Chandler journey, Matt, because your top choice is... Ta-da.
Well, I didn't know Luke was picking a Chandler. It's going to be 3 in a row now.
3 in a row.
My top choice is The Long Goodbye, and that might be a polarizing choice, but I think...
Oh, it's a great book.
I think it's a masterpiece, really. And what I like about it is that the mystery is neither here nor there. I don't really care about that. What this is almost like Chandler's farewell note. This is a story about what it's like to be an alcoholic. This is a story about a man in downward spiral. It's a pretty bleak book, but I think it's his most ambitious, certainly, most profound, I think, and certainly the one that is his most personal. It's very difficult not to see Chandler in both Roger Wade and Terry Lennox in many ways. And Marlowe, I think, is on the way to being the same way if he's not careful. And I just think there really is corruption worn on everyone's sleeve in this book. Captain Gregorius is a monster, and Marlowe's frustration with what people are doing and what people are saying, and his frustration with Wade, just sort of saying, if he wants to drink himself to death, just let him drink himself to death. In many ways, it's like Chandler's Black and Blue for me. It's him coming to terms with himself and where he is. And there's a distinct valedictory tone to this book. To the extent that actually Luke and I were talking the other day, and he mentioned he was reading Playback.
Oh, right.
And I'd forgotten about Playback altogether because The Long Goodbye just seems to be the end of Marlowe for me. It just seems a natural place for him to end with that great sign-off line. There's never been a way to say goodbye to the cops, whatever it is. I didn't see any of them again apart from the cops, and no way's been invented to say goodbye to them. This is a monster of a book, but it's very rewarding, and I think it's very thought-provoking, and it's more than just a crime novel for me.
I don't know if you guys have ever read it. Anthony Burgess published a slim volume of his 99 most important novels published since the beginning of the Second World War, and he included this one.
This is one, yeah.
And I think with real justification. I think.
I think
novel.
so.
Yeah.
I think it starts in great fashion. It starts with one of those opening lines that the first time I saw Terry, I think, well, if it is the first time, what about the second and the third? What are they going to be like? And it's a natural starting point, and you know that things are only going to get worse. And then when they do get worse, Marlowe's refusal to listen to anything that Lennox has got to say, because if he knows anything, it'll implicate him. I love all that sort of heroism, for want of a better word, and then so that he can with his hand on his heart and being true to himself, say to the cops, I don't know anything. You can beat me as much as you want, but I don't know. And his refusal to not be paid, not to let someone pay to get him out of the slammer, turning away the lawyer, all that is peak Marlowe for me. Peak Marlowe.
It's a great book about friendship as well.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. Fantastic. So, your top choice, young Luke.
Yes.
To the one of the many seeming successors to Chandler, and we'll talk a little bit about where they overlap, but we're going to talk about Robert B. Parker.
I love Robert B. Parker.
What? We've never talked about Spencer before, ever.
Have we not?
We've talked about Spencer for Hire tons of times.
Oh yeah, okay. I was like, wait a minute, what? I was actually watching an episode of Spencer for Hire today, this very day. I was, Robert Urich,
3, yeah,
Robert Urich and Avery Brooks. God, perfect casting.
Well, this is when I ask. You've got to pick a book that doesn't have Hawke in it.
I know. This book always has stood out to me.
Which book is it?
Oh, sorry. Looking for Rachel Wallace. I can't remember what number in the line it is. It's fairly early on-ish.
It's about 5, I think, something like that.
I could have picked Early Autumn, which is another freaking fantastic novel. And that's more about fatherhood. What I found so fascinating about reading this is really a lot of this stems from just the masterful storytelling that Robert B. Parker possessed. And his ability to so clearly and concisely present interesting socio-political debates in his book and give you two opposing characters. And at no point does he tell you which. It's like Star Trek. It's like classic Star Trek. They'll pose the problem, but you, the audience, have to decide where you sit. Just because Kirk or Spock or Picard or Riker fall on a side, you don't necessarily fall on their side. It's like that episode where Worf is told to, your blood will help save this Romulan's life. He's like, fuck that Romulan. Romulans killed my parents. I'm not going to give him my blood. And he doesn't. And you're like, holy shit, what? And, I love, man, the 80s, man. They knew what they were doing in the 80s with their fiction. And I think that Parker does that kind of stuff really well. And I think Looking for Rachel Wallace is a great example of that, because this is at a time where, there's a lot of political turmoil in terms of homosexuality, and he's hired to bodyguard a very far left liberal woman who is a lesbian, and his view of Rachel Wallace is that she is not his cup of tea, but he'll do the job. But he is everything that she hates in what is masculinity, what is current culture, she absolutely despises him. And I love that the way that Parker strings these two together, who are completely opposed in their political beliefs. However, Spencer he can put that stuff aside and do the job and keep her safe from the threats that are coming at her and things like that. And I think the ending is really quite powerful, because these two opposing sides, these people who are on the complete opposite side of the political spectrum, find some sort of common ground, and they learn to respect one another and not approve necessarily. She does not approve of what he does. She doesn't approve of his violence. She doesn't approve of his kind of machoism. She doesn't approve of that. But at the same time, when he saves her from being kidnapped and things like that, she says, I was crying. She wept and thankful that he was there to save her. But at the same time, doesn't approve of what he does. And he's like, well, if you approve of me, then this wouldn't be a fun friendship, would it? Spencer's always got that wonderful, wonderful crack along the way, in the way that Sam Spade in the 1931 film doesn't have the crack. Spencer's got the crack. And so for me, this has always been a really important book. I've told many people to read it because it's useful at looking at different perspectives and learning, especially in today's society where we are so split down the middle. There is no middle anymore. There is just, you have to be far one way or far the other way. And we don't even take the time to attempt to understand someone else's perspective. Then when I go back and I read something from 1983 or something like that, and it's so insightful. 1980, yeah. It's so insightful. It's so moving in places. And that message that Parker is trying to convey in this is such an important, timeless one, that I think is part of the main reason why I out of all of his books, he wrote 20 some odd, 27, I don't know, 30 books. This is the one that I'm always keen to push on people, because I think its themes are so important and remain so relevant, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in your own echo chamber and not have to engage with people who don't necessarily believe what you believe. Parker is great at challenging the readers to look at other perspectives and reevaluate stuff. That's my rant.
I enjoyed rereading it for today's chat. I hadn't read it in ages, and I've got one of those horrible recent editions. It's that and Promised Land. It's a double bill. So nice combo, which is why I got it. But on the front, it sort of says, before Jack Reacher, there was Spencer.
Ugh,
Isn't that depressing? No. It's kind of like...
Ew.
But anyway, yeah.
Not even the same.
I know. It's just about the marketplace. I mean, I think by that point, I don't know if Parker, I think, had passed away by the time that edition came out. I'd had an older edition, but then I wanted to get Promised Land, and so in the end, I just got that one. It was interesting rereading it because obviously some bits of it are necessarily dated in the sense that Rachel Wallace in particular is so emphatic about herself and her life choices, and so explicit in the way she says, I approve of this and I don't approve of that, in a way that you sort of almost think, not sure anybody would really feel that they would verbalize it quite that boldly.
Have you been on Twitter, sir?
Well, that's my point. But this is about two people actually talking to each other, because that's the difference, right?
Yes.
And I agree with you completely, Luke. It's this thing where people, when they're actually in front of each other, civility creeps in or screaming ensues. But this is a situation where you're constantly having to explain yourself to someone, and you should never be put in that position. And especially because Spencer doesn't particularly seem to actually make it happen deliberately. He's just he's approaching his job, and he's told that you're not going to like me because I have to do a job you don't want me to do. However, I'm here and I'm proving to you that it's necessary, whether it's because you're going to get a cake in the face or because you're about to get dragged out of an office somewhere. There is this funny scene where she gets a cake in the face, which is quite bizarre. But anyway, but no, I think I love the books. I always like the fact that Parker ended up writing Westerns. There's a strong sense of that he's sort of channeling the Western. It's a kind of almost a Elmore Leonard thing. I mean, there's an author we haven't picked on. But I always find that interesting. But I was going to ask you both what you thought about, because I have split opinions on this, on the Parker-Chandler continuations. I'll tell you my feeling first, please. Just so you know. I actually think what he did with Poodle Springs was actually pretty decent, in the sense that the way he wrote it is pretty close to what I think, at best, Chandler could probably have achieved at that time in his career. It feels legitimate in the sense that you're not doing it the way he would have written it in 1939. No, you're writing it the way he would have written it in 1958. And I always think that Parker comes up with a very neat reversal of, that old thing that you have in basically all hardboiled novels, which is that you have to have two plots, not one. One is usually not enough, or if you're Ian Rankin, you need four. But basically, but it's always an A and a B at least. And here it's because it's somebody who's a bigamist, who's got a dual life. And so you've got two plot strands, and it's feathered in, which I think is nice. Whereas the prequel he wrote, Perchance to Dream, his prequel to The Big Sleep, I think is absolutely terrible. Mm-hmm. So I just get that out the way. Over to you guys. What do you think?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I looked into this when I was doing my PhD, and there was this really funny study. It seemed like one of the most silly, pointless studies possible, but there was one. It was looking at Perchance to Dream and Poodle Springs, and they basically looked at the sentence patterns and the words that Chandler used, and so on and so forth. And Perchance to Dream has more likeness to a Chandler novel, right? In terms of what he's using. Poodle Springs didn't rate so highly in its pastiche-ishness, its imitation-ness, but it is better received. So I found that interesting, just even though it's seems like a very pointless study. I'm like, okay, what's your point? But it is interesting because I haven't been able to finish Perchance to Dream. I have it. It's sitting there, and it's because I'm a Parker loyalist, so I get his stuff. I've got all of his stuff. But and I'm also a Chandler guy, so I got to get all the Chandler. So Parker is the only pastiche of Chandler that I will buy. After that, it stops. It's a hard stop for me. But I agree. I think Poodle Springs, he did the best he was going to do. It's not my favorite generally. I don't know how well it would have been had it just been Chandler himself either. You know what I mean? It's not my favorite. I really never go back to it. I'm happy to go to playback, but I'm not. Poodle is a different sort of beast for me. It's good for what it is, and I think Parker was probably the best suited writer at the time to finish it. Maybe I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head who would have been the right kind of person for that. That's my take. It's eh.
How about you, Matt?
Well, I've read all of the pastiches that have been done for Marlowe. Some I wish I hadn't.
Yes.
Some I quite enjoyed. What is absolutely fixed in my mind is that Parker's are the best, without a shadow of a doubt, in the sense, closest to what I like, as you say, Sergio, what I think Chandler would have done. Poodle Springs is as close as we can get. I don't think Poodle Springs was ever going to be a classic, sadly. So I think Parker is the best at Marlowe pastiche. But I'll answer the main question by saying I can remember it's a long time since I've read both of them, or either of them. And I can remember quite a bit about Poodle Springs, but I don't remember anything about Perchance to Dream.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, apart from the fact that it is somehow linked to The Big Sleep. And whether it's a prequel or a sequel, I couldn't tell you. But I think it's a sequel. Is it a sequel? Anyway, whatever.
Yes,
I know that he's hired by the butler, but that's about all I can remember. And I only know that because that's sort of something that you see if you Google it, and I've not gone back to reread it or anything. So I can't remember anything about Perchance to Dream. But I can remember a fair bit about Poodle Springs, and I think that's an answer in itself.
Yeah, I don't own a copy of Perchance to Dream.
I've got it in
hardback.
hardback.
Yeah, well,
I did.
Yeah, I think that's how I read it as well. Yeah. I was going to say, did you guys ever see the TV movie version, which is interesting? I mean, adapted by Tom Stoppard. And directed by
Bob Raffleson, who did Postman Always Rings Twice in 1981.
Yeah.
So
and it's an okay TV movie. Some bits are changed. I mean, but it works.
James Caan is the godfather of private eyes. Philip Marlowe. Ask anyone. Moving home can be murder. Poodle Springs.
I call it Marlowe Light.
Sure.
But having said that, I've watched it several times. I never sort of come away from it thinking, well, that was a waste of time. I always come away from it thinking, well, that was nice.
So my last question, actually, to take us back to the wonders of The Long Goodbye, what do you guys think of the Robert Altman film version? I'm a fan, but they coexist. They're separate things, but I love it. What do you guys think?
I'd agree with that. I love it for what it is, but it's not The Long Goodbye.
I don't think I have much more to add to that. Yeah, it's I mean, it was when I first watched it again. I came to that film very late as well. I think I watched that in 2017, and I was like, "What am I watching?" But at the same, but not necessarily in a negative way. There was an adjustment that needed to be made with it. I thought Elliot Gould. I like that casting. I like some of what he does. Sometimes it gets a little bit repetitive. It's not The Long Goodbye, but it's still entertaining. I like the cat.
Sterling Hayden is great in it.
Yeah, he's a great Roger Wade. Yeah,
but I think that I would like it more if he was called something else, and it was called something else, and I could say whoever wrote this has read The Long Goodbye at some point in their life, rather than being told this is The Long Goodbye with Philip Marlowe in it. Does that make sense?
Right.
If it was its own entity with no connection to Chandler whatsoever, I'd think it was probably a pretty, a top-ranking neo-noir, perhaps. The fact that they call him Philip Marlowe and they call it The Long Goodbye drags it down a little bit for me, because although having said that, how you would ever go about filming The Long Goodbye novel, God only knows.
It'd have to be a mini-series, wouldn't it?
It'd have to be a TV series, yeah.
Which I think they have tried.
One of that, So,
but
I like it. As you say, Sergio, they are different things. They're different entities, and I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's not Philip Marlowe, and it's not The Long Goodbye.
Mr. Marlowe, you're the nicest neighbor we ever had.
Got to be the nicest neighbor on a private eye.
Meet Philip Marlowe.
Marlowe? Marlowe.
Marlowe. Your name, Marlowe?
You shouldn't be out of bed, Mr. Marlowe.
I'm not Mr. Marlowe. This is Mr. Marlowe right here.
Well, who are you?
You're Philip Marlowe.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Elliot Gould is Philip Marlowe in Robert Altman's The Long Goodbye.
How come a horn? You're supposed to get out of the way.
Before we go, can you tell me a little bit about the latest adventure in podcasting? Because Mean Streets has morphed into something brand new. Please tell us more about it.
Yeah, me and Matt, we were sitting around one day thinking, hey, look, there's still a number of, classic film noirs out there and neo-noirs out there, but I think both of us were just getting a little bit antsy to want to expand and talk about, basically widen the investigations. We didn't really want to change our style, but we wanted to start to include more films. And so we sort of sat in there and talked about what those ideas could be and thought, well, what if one idea was we were going to have like two simultaneous podcasts running Mean Streets and then a new podcast alongside. And then we were both like, nah, we don't have enough time for that. And then we thought, well, why don't we just rebrand the whole show into Cinema Sleuths, keep the style more or less, but have a new name. And we're both sort of like, yeah, it seemed like a good idea, and best to do it now rather than later. We thought we're still a very small podcast, so it's sort of I think we have loyal listeners who were happy to hang out with us and keep going. But we sort of thought that if we kept the name Mean Streets, which, look, there's a couple other podcasts out there called Mean Streets already. So we're like, it gives us something a little bit, more original to work with. But we just sort of thought, hey, if we stuck with a title that was Mean Streets, the Film Noir podcast, but we're talking about Star Wars, people are going to be like, well, what the F is that about?
Well, yeah. I tell you what, I do have this feeling. I always think that when you get round to doing the prequels in a couple of years' time, I honestly think that the second one of the prequels is basically a film noir. Attack of the Clones. Sorry, in case that isn't, because, basically Obi-Wan is going around. He's a private eye. The lighting is very noirish. There's even that scene when he goes to like a 1950s style diner that he can talk to his contact, right? And obviously when there's the murder scene and it's kind of like this weird, like almost like a snake, almost like a Conan Doyle asp or whatever it was, the adder. And that feels all very noirish to me. So, just saying. But nonetheless, I see your point.
Yes, I mean we were thinking of ways of trying to how can we stretch certain things and push it into the podcast, and
how wide can we stretch the envelope is what we were saying, and we decided that not wide enough to do what we wanted to start talking about. So we just thought we'd, like Luke says, broaden the horizons.
So this launched basically 10 days ago. This was on the 4th of May, right?
Yes, May the 4th be with you.
Yes, well, it certainly was for you guys. For Brilliant. So your first podcast was all about Star Wars, but from a particular point of view, right?
We really wanted to do Star Wars. We thought it's a really good series to kick off with. But actually, Sergio, we have to give you credit.
You do?
Yes, because initially we had all this planned out. We were going to kick off like towards the end of April. And then I remember talking to you about the relaunch, and you were like, "Oh, well, I'm assuming you're going to kick off on May the 4th." And I was like, "Mother, of course, we should be doing that. Why? Literally, it was like 1 week ahead. Like, why did I? Yeah. So yeah.
Some things are so obvious you can't see them straight away.
I'd even forgotten I'd said it to you. So there you go.
We will never forget.
We won't forget.
So so we kicked off on May the 4th with Star Wars, a trilogy of retcons. We thought, look, there's 1,000,000,001 Star Wars podcasts out there and episodes on Star Wars. We're like, well, what could we do that's just slightly different? We thought, well, let's talk about it from the perspective of the retcons, but not just the general retcons that people know about, that like the general audiences are aware of, but like let's look at changes from that happened from the novelizations into the films, because all of those came out first, and then the film comes out, and then you have Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and that gets completely erased. So we thought it'd be fun to kind of look at all of these different versions of Star Wars that were floating around between 1977 and 83, and see what little nuggets made it into the novel that didn't make it into the book, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's been going well so far.
Fantastic. Okay, so
yeah, it's good fun. It's good fun to do.
There will still be plenty of noir going ahead as well. So you're going to alternate, or just do a bit of this and a bit of that? What's the plan?
A bit of this, a bit of that. We have plenty of noir coming up. I mean, we've got Detour in the pipeline, The Long Goodbye in the pipeline. Michael Mann's Thief is coming soon as well. So yeah, we will very much be continuing to do film noir, but we'll also be mixing up with other stuff like The Predator or whatever.
Well, on that note, thank you both so much for contributing to this exhaustive, and I hope not too exhausting, analysis of some of your favourites. I won't say let's do this again sometime, but but at some point, we got to do a Robert B. Parker or something like that. Because,
yeah, definitely.
It's so great. But thanks for coming along, guys. And
thanks for having us on.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, Sergio. Bye.
You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix. And it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.